Before the light of the gods entered the world, there was only darkness ruled by titans. After an epic war, Zeus seized the heavens and exiled the titans, seeking to imprison them for all eternity. The lands were cleansed and mortals flourished. But arrogance precedes many a fall, and even a god's prison may be breached.
Hello RPGamers, and welcome to another episode of An Hour to Impress. This week we're going to be going way back in time to ancient Greece. The year 2006, when THQ still had an office building and Greece still had an economy. The game is Titan Quest, developed by Ironlore and released almost 10 years ago. It seems I have some sort of penchant for third-person looters set during mythological times, as this is the second one I've done in only 5 episodes. Unlike 5 Guardians of David, however, this is not an indie game, and it seems to be probably large enough to rival the big boys like Diablo. Something that's kind of interesting about Titan Quest is that, unlike most third-person looters like Diablo, you don't really get to choose a class or anything like that at the start of the game. Basically, all you can do is run around and hit things with your stick. So the first 10 minutes or so until you level up once are actually pretty boring and even surprisingly difficult, as I learned rather painfully when I came across my first magic-using enemy. So there you go, dead. So yeah, the game doesn't really open up until you get to that first level up, at which point you have 8 different character classes that you can choose from. So the 8 classes in Titan Quest are the Stormcaller, which uses lightning and cold damage spells. Then there's the Pyromancer, which uses fire spells along with an earth elemental to distract its enemies. Then there's the Warrior, which obviously uses pretty basic physical attacks. There's the Thurgist, which is sort of like a necromancer, uses life leech skills, and also has the ability to summon a Lich King. Then there's the Defender, which is basically the game's tanking class, with a heavy focus on defense and shield use. There's the Wanderer, which is kind of like a druid, has healing spells, auras, and a variety of summons. There's the Hunter, which uses bows and spears for long-distance combat. And finally, there's the Rogue, which of course is focusing on big single-target damage, poisons, bleeds, that sort of thing. I ended up going with the Wanderer class for this playthrough, which in retrospect is probably a mistake, since this seems like it's more suited for group roles with its healing spells and its several passive abilities as well. It might have been more interesting to go with a damage-dealing class, but at this point it's too late. In any case, the Wanderer has a couple of interesting first-level spells. It gets a basic healing spell, which is extremely useful, along with a wolf summon that it can bring out to help fight. I actually have to admit that I'm pretty impressed with the diversity of classes in Titan Quest. In most third-person looters, you don't see this kind of diversity in play roles. It's very rare to see a tanking and a healing dedicated class, in fact. Most third-person looters focus almost entirely on the ability to deal damage, so it's interesting to see that this game seems to focus a little bit more on group dynamics, which would probably make the multiplayer a lot more interesting. So, with all my new abilities in place, let's try that fight against that magic user again. Ah, sweet revenge. So at this point in the game, it kind of dies down a bit. It's a pretty typical third-person looter from here on out. You run around, kill stuff, you find items. So for a while now, there's nothing interesting to talk about. So I think this is probably a good time to talk about the game's story and setting. I mentioned in my 5 Guardians of David video that I'm a huge fan of mythologies and mythological settings like this, and Greek mythology is by far my favorite. There's so much richness to the Greek myth and Greek lore that it just makes for a great setting for a game. With that in mind, it's kind of disappointing that Titan Quest doesn't use its Greek setting more effectively. There's really not a lot of story here, and apart from a handful of Greek myth references that I've recognized throughout the first hour, it's mostly just a bunch of random side quests that you'd find in any fantasy game. So I'm a little disappointed that the setting wasn't used to more effect. Although, being only an hour into the game, it's really difficult to say how it plays out from here on in. At this point, the only real story that I've been able to see is a vague quest to find a Spartan camp and talk to General Leonidas. But apart from that, there doesn't seem to be much here. So this is actually a pretty cool section right here, where the game kind of puts itself ahead of Diablo, and that's with the staff weapon. Unlike staff weapons in Diablo, where you just basically hit things with your stick, the staff weapon in this game actually has a magical spell attached to it, with basically infinite casts, making it a much more useful weapon for magic users. So I thought that was kind of cool. Anyways, the game keeps moving along here, and there's not really much to talk about. There's a kind of a cool little miniature boss fight on this overpass here, but other than that, it's pretty straightforward and not really much more to say here. This is a good time, though, to talk about one of the biggest issues with Titan Quest, and it's also one of the biggest issues with classic Diablo 2 as well, and that's inventory space. Just like Diablo 2, Titan Quest has really limited inventory space. Items take up multiple inventory slots, and they can't be rotated or anything like that. So you're stuck trying to play around with your inventory and only picking up certain items just because you just don't have enough space. And unlike Diablo 2, as far as I've been able to tell, there is no stash, so you can't even store things that you want to keep. You just have to kind of keep them on you. There might be a stash later on in the game, or maybe I just overlooked it. But either way, it's an oversight that is really annoying. So after another level up, I got access to a couple more skills. One of them is the simple aura that buffs me and my minion. The other one is a little bit more interesting. It's a debuff attack that propagates to other enemies nearby. It's unfortunately not that powerful, at least not at the early levels, so it doesn't really do a whole lot. But it's an interesting skill nonetheless. And once again, we're into a bit of a stretch where not a lot happens. It's just a lot of third-person looting, hack, 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 slash, 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 loot, loot, loot. So it just keeps going for a while. It's enjoyable when you're actually playing it, but not really interesting to watch. Eventually, you do get into I did get into an encounter, which is easily the most interesting encounter that I got into during this hour-long playthrough. Just a whole bunch of enemies that sort of appear in an interesting way. I almost got overwhelmed a couple times during this, so I'll let you watch the whole battle before I continue. Yeah, so hopefully that's a sign of more exciting battles to come later on in the game. That about wraps this episode up. There's not a lot more to talk about. I actually do have one more thing I want to show you guys before we completely wrap up here. It's just a little bit of a sample of the voice acting and a neat little reference to a couple of Greek myth figures that I'm particularly fond of.
Hold it there. No civilian gets in to see General Leonidas, especially when he's in a council of war. Well, look. A particularly savage centaur named Nessus has killed several of our farmers. He runs wild in the Pelena Valley. We don't have the men to send after it right now. Kill the beast, and I'll see you get to speak to Leonidas.
And that's Titan Quest. It's pretty typical third-person looter. Definitely on a level playing field with Diablo, I would say. Certainly seems like it has potential to be really interesting, especially if you can get more than one person playing at the same time, though 10 years after its release, that might be a little bit difficult. And despite its age, the game is still available on Steam for a regular price of $16.99 Canadian. As always, if you have any comments or suggestions, you can leave them below. Thanks for watching.